Inspirational Creatives, episode 157.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, and you're listening to the Inspirational Creatives podcast with Rob Lawrence.
Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. My guest today is someone who interviews entrepreneurs that make a living with their camera. I was introduced to him through John Lee Dumas's Podcasters Paradise, and I've since found out we're mutually connected through previous Inspirational Creatives guest and motivational videographer Michael Gebben. He's someone who runs his own production company and has a podcast show for creative people like you and me called Finding Creative Success. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Matt Peet. Matt, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I'm excited for the show today.
Fantastic. So for our listener and for those yet to meet you, how would you describe what it is you do and for who?
I'm a videographer, photographer who does a podcast to help people make more money with their camera. And my video photography business is mainly for brides because we're in the Charleston, South Carolina market. So we're a destination wedding spot. So we have a lot of weddings coming through the area. So our main clientele is wedding clients. And for the podcast, it's anybody who wants to make money with their camera.
That's fantastic. So let's start here. How do you attract clients?
A big part of it is word of mouth. So when you're at a wedding, interacting with those people, the other vendors that are there, whether it's a wedding planner, the photographer, the caterer, anything like that, making a good impression on those people and making friends in the industry who can refer you. And we do some Facebook marketing and Google AdWords and that kind of stuff that's very targeted towards our audience, towards our target client that brings in a few weddings every year as well.
Fantastic. And how long have you been doing this for, Matt?
We've been in the wedding videography business for going right at 2 years now.
And how did you get into this business?
We got into doing wedding videography through, like you mentioned, Michael Gebben, your past guest. I found him online one day through a group called Create Insights, and he was one of the co-founders of the group. And we got to talking, and I was doing videos. I was trying to become a videographer. I was still in college, and I did a video for a guy, and I charged the guy, I think it was $150 to shoot this video. And it wasn't just shooting the video. I had to drive 45 minutes to get to the location to shoot it, shoot the video, edit it, drive back, all that. A ton of gear that I was taking with me that I had acquired over the past couple of years of trying to become a videographer. And after that gig, I was just burnt out because I was like, I can't turn this into a business because I'm not going to make any money at $150 was taking me, 4 or 5 days to produce. It's not going to work out. So I ran into Michael Gebben online with this group, and I saw what he was doing in the wedding industry and the videos he was creating, the clientele he was bringing in, and how much money he was making with it. And it just really inspired me. I was like, that can be a business. I see the business model. I see what he's doing. I see how he's doing it. And I wanted to pursue that. And, I hired Michael Gebben as my coach for a while, and he kind of taught me through how to sell and how to be yourself and that kind of stuff. And it was really great. Michael Gebben really got me kickstarted there. And I also had another mentor named Brent Thacker, who I interned for shortly after I met Gebben. He was in the wedding video industry. He actually trained under Gebben. So they had a very similar style. And I interned under Brent and his wife, Sarah, and they just taught me everything about style. And we would have meetings and sit down over lunch and talk about the business end of all of the video production stuff. And between Brent and Michael Gebben, it gave me a really good kickstart into my career.
That's amazing. So it sounds like your business model changed once you started working with Brent and Michael. What would you say fundamentally changed for you? How were you able to turn that into a profitable business?
I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that I can charge more money. And to elaborate on that a little bit, like I said, I did that one gig for a guy where I drove to a different city and shot the video, everything for $150. And my reasoning for that was, well, I can get the song for $10 and I already have all of the gear, so none of that cost me anything. So I was essentially, I wasn't making much money. It was covering gas and the song. And it wasn't till after I met Michael that I realized, hey, what I do is worth something. My time and my expertise is worth something. It's not just what am I putting in, what cost is going into the video, but what are my expertise that I'm bringing forward to make the video.
So it's a case of sort of being more proud of your prices in that sense.
Exactly. You have to own up to who you are and realize that you are worth something and you're worth more than $150.
That's amazing. So what were some of the mindset shifts that you felt you had to go through?
Realizing that you're worth more than the $150. And for me, niching down, I didn't necessarily want to go into weddings at the time. I didn't think that that was something that I would want to do. And, my friends later picked on me about it as I knew a lot of stuff about weddings. My friends would mess with me, but it's like, I'm making $2,500 a weekend shooting weddings now. And for our market, that's really good money. And, that mindset shift of this is my target audience. And after you get into it and doing weddings and creating those videos, it becomes a lot of fun. So it's just getting over that mindset shift that, I don't want to do weddings. They can be fun. It's trying different things to find out where your niche is. Whenever you're first starting out, casting that wide net for your creativity to see where it falls, see what your passion is and where you really enjoy working.
So it's a case of like casting your net wide and then kind of honing it down. Exactly.
I feel like if you're just starting out and you think you know what you want to do, that might not be what your end goal is. You might enjoy something else a little more, but you're never going to know that because you didn't try it. So if you're just starting out, I always tell people to try a bunch of different things, see where your passion is, see what you enjoy most.
Did you know you always wanted to do weddings?
No, I did not. In high school, I started doing video production in high school for a journalism class. And we were just doing like news stories around the school and that kind of stuff. That was when I first introduced to video. And I ended up going to school for graphic design because I went to a college that didn't offer any video production stuff. And I couldn't do anything with math or science. I just really hate math and science. So I chose to do graphic design and I loved it. And I just assumed while I was in college, my first 2 years in college, I assumed because I was going for graphic design that I was going to graduate and become a graphic designer. So for a while there, I just thought that was the natural path until my senior year when I started training with Brent and I met Michael and all that. I realized that you don't have to do that. The graphic design helped, but it wasn't necessary. I didn't have to be a graphic designer, even though that's what my degree was in.
Does much of the graphic design show up in your work today?
It does. We're redoing our logo for our video production company right now, so it's more appealing to brides because I created the logo back when I was a sophomore or junior in college, and it's been our logo for a while now, and we're just realizing, we're targeting down, we're niching down to that wedding platform, and it's just not an appealing logo. So I do use graphic design for that kind of stuff. I use Canva a lot, if you've heard of canva.com.
Mm-hmm.
I use that a lot for my design stuff just because it's faster than opening up one of my design softwares and creating everything from scratch. I believe done's better than perfect. So I go in Canva and make that happen. But the biggest thing for me that came from graphic design, I would have to say it didn't come directly from graphic design. It's not something I learned in the classroom because in my graphic design studies, you learn a lot about how to do Photoshop and Illustrator and composition and all that kind of stuff, which is great. And you need to know that to be a graphic designer. But the biggest thing for me came about a year after I graduated when I was running my own business. And I realized that I spent 4 years behind a computer or behind a camera and I didn't have any communication skills. I had no people skills. So to run your own business, you need that. You have to be able to communicate and to talk to people. So about a year after I graduated, that hard lesson that I learned from graphic design, you have to get out and network. So that's my biggest takeaway from 4 years of graphic design school.
That's amazing. So for somebody with no people skills, it's pretty amazing that you've got a podcast right now. And I'd love to ask you more about that. But let's have a little chat about some of the marketing aspects of what you do, because it sounds like you very much enjoy what it is you do. But I also recognize that a lot of creative folks really struggle with the marketing component. Was that true for you?
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's been true for the longest time. And for me, the way I got around it, one, I studied under people like Brent. I figured out his word of mouth. Whenever he does a wedding, he'll go in and he'll shoot like 30 seconds of the DJ or the band or something like that and put them together, just a 30-second long video. And it doesn't even necessarily have to have a song. It's not a fully produced thing. It's just, hey, here's some great shots I grabbed of you at this wedding last Saturday. I hope you can use it in your marketing somewhere. If you want it, let me know, and send it to them. And that gets your word of mouth going. So things like that is great for word of mouth. But reading books has brought me a long way over the course of the last year and a half since I started doing that. And I always suggest, if you're not a reader, then go to Audible and listen to a book. That's where it hit me, was when I started reading.
And how has that reading helped you? What books have you been listening to specifically?
It's a combination of a few different books. I read a lot of selling books. So Grant Cardone, a lot of his stuff, 10X, Sell or Be Sold, that kind of stuff. I love his books. Then there's one called How to Win Friends and Influence People that I read as I was coming out of college, the end of my senior year. I read that one, and it just teaches you, the name sounds, controversial, how to win friends and influence people. So you think it's shady, but it's really not. It's a book about how to be a better person and how to be a better friend. And I suggest that one to everybody, as well as right now I'm going through Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. And I don't know if you've ever read that one. Have you got a chance to read that one, Rob?
I haven't had a chance to read that one yet.
It's pretty good. It's not a traditional book like most of Gary Vaynerchuk's books. It goes through the different platforms. So it starts off with Facebook, and he gives a introduction to the chapter. It's a few pages long, saying why it's important and what people are doing wrong. And then essentially the book is a case study where he goes through different brands and picks apart their marketing on Facebook and on Twitter and all these different social media platforms, showing what they did right and what they did wrong and how to better improve it. So for marketing, it's really a marketing goldmine, because on every page, there's a takeaway of what a brand did right or what a brand did wrong with their Facebook or their Twitter or anything like that. So for marketing, I always recommend that one. And, like I said, a big part of it's networking. And like for me, networking, I just had to force myself to network, because I spent 4 years behind a computer. I didn't like being around people. So I went and paid to be a part of groups. And since I was financially invested, I was going to be invested in being there.
What would your best advice be for someone looking to increase their confidence when it comes to networking?
Increasing their confidence, I would say, one, get healthy. Whenever I'm vegging out, eating pizza every night and going out to eat and eating unhealthy every day, my confidence goes down.
Right.
I can tell a confidence shift whenever I'm eating healthy and running, staying active, that kind of stuff. Even if it's not even completely taking effect yet and you're not losing weight, you just feel better. You feel more confident whenever you're active. So I would suggest, one, getting active, and two, doing it, just getting out there and networking. Doing it more and more, being more active, being in front of more people, it'll hone in your networking skills and you'll have more confidence. You'll get more used to it and you won't feel like that fly on the wall at every meeting.
So on the one hand, it's kind of practice, and on the other hand, it's about getting healthy. And I love this relationship that you've just revealed there between getting healthy and increasing your confidence. That's something I hadn't really come across before.
My fiance even said she can tell whenever I'm healthy and I'm staying active and watching what I eat, she can tell that my confidence goes up. And that shows, one, when I'm on sales calls with clients, I'm more confident. Just, I don't know what it is. It's like a subconscious thing. Whenever I'm talking on the phone, I'm more confident about my prices, about my product, about how I perform. When we're out shooting a wedding and, it's a 12-hour day where I'm carrying around a camera, I'm just more confident that this video is going to look awesome when I'm done.
Yeah, you sound really confident with your work, and it's really, really nice to hear. Has it just been getting healthy that's helped you with that confidence and practice, of course? Is there anything else that you've been doing to help strengthen that confidence of yours?
I think it's having knowledge that knowing what you're doing is right. For the longest time with my business, it's been, marketing on Facebook, creating Facebook ads that are targeted, and you don't see any results, and then you have one person contacting you. You're like, oh, it's just one person contacting me, and you get on the phone with them and you give them your spiel about what all you offer, and nothing sounds good to you. You're not that good. But what I've learned through my podcast is I'm learning how to run a business, how to run a photography and video business. And that confidence is showing. Like a week after I made some changes, that was advice given through one of my guests. I made a bunch of changes on my website. And about a week after that, I had a wedding planner contact me and she's like, hey, are you available for these 5 dates? And tried to get me to sign 5 weddings. I was already booked for a few of the dates, but I mean, we just did one this past weekend for her. That was one of the dates she sent us. And, knowing that marketing that I'm doing is coming from professionals who know what they're doing, who have been in the industry long enough and they know it works. Learning from that and doing that, it's like, hey, I'm doing this because I know it's going to work, not because I'm just testing it.
So did that wedding planner know about you already, or did she just find you cold?
She found me cold and she loved our work and sent me 5 weddings.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how do you think she found you? Is that something you've been doing on like the SEO or the website or side of things?
I've been working a good bit on SEO, adding a lot more content. For the longest time, I treated my website like a portfolio. So you essentially went to my website and you could look at videos and you could fill out a contact form. And that was it. And it was not descriptive at all. So one of the things I've been learning, is to be authentic and be yourself on your website. So I've been doing that. And in the process of doing that, adding an FAQ page so people have answers right there on the website and a descriptive about us page that just kind of tells more about me. It adds SEO, but it also gives the people looking at my site a chance to connect. So she found us, I want to say she found us through word of mouth. She heard about us from a friend and went to our website and fell in love with our work. But like I said, that goes back to word of mouth, which is part of our marketing.
So our listener might be wanting to take a look at your website right now. So what's the website link that they can take a look at?
You can go to repeatvideos.com.
Okay. And how do you spell that?
You can spell REPEET videos.com. Peet is my last name for anybody who doesn't know yet. So my last name is spelled PEET. But with Repeat Videos, if you spell Peet either way, you can even spell it correctly and it'll get you to my website.
That's smart. Excellent. So she found you cold. That's amazing. Are there any other activities that you're doing to promote yourself? Are you doing like wedding fairs and that kind of thing?
We don't do any wedding fair. We haven't done any of those. I've talked to a few videographers in the industry, and from what I understand, those can be very hit or miss. And at $700 and $800 a pop, it's just not something that we're looking, as a one-off thing to invest in. And if there's somebody out there, a videographer or photographer who is doing that successfully, then I'd love to talk. I'd love to learn about your experience and how you better optimize that. But right now, we're doing more things. We signed up for Borrowed in Blue online, which is a wedding vendor hosting site. So you go on there and we paid for a premium spot. So we're at the top of their page whenever you look for videographers in our area. So, we're top of mind for people coming up, and we'd signed up with that based off a recommendation from one of my guests. That helps with SEO and it helps us get found cold too.
Fabulous. So is it mainly wedding planners that you work with, or do you work with clients directly too?
We work with some clients directly. The Charleston market, it's developing, this trend that you need a wedding planner, which I love because wedding planners have the day of timeline and they have everything lined up. So we really enjoy working with wedding planners. So the more we can do that, we opt to work with wedding planners, but it's not necessary. We do have some clients who don't have wedding planners, and we always just like to sit down with them and find out their timeline for their day, because that's important for us to know when we need to get there and, when we need to head over to the ceremony spot and time to set up and all of that kind of stuff. But we do enjoy working with wedding planners. And once you get in and you do a few weddings with a wedding planner and they like your style and they like your work, they're more likely to recommend you. So you work with them more often.
Yeah, I really like that. I can see the sense in that, because in some ways it's a bit like working with an agent, because they're actually finding the wedding guests for you. And on the other hand, they're doing a lot of the planning aspect, which I imagine is quite a large part of your work.
Oh, yeah. And like you said, it's kind of like having an agent. This girl that contacted us recently with the 5 weddings, I didn't talk to the client we shot for this past weekend. I didn't meet them. I never talked to them because it was like a last minute booking. They booked us 2 weeks before their wedding. And I'd never talked to them before their wedding day. She went and sold me to them and they booked me. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I like, but I do like having that connection with the clients. It does help on a wedding day. But like I said, they booked so last minute that we just couldn't make it happen.
That's fascinating. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. So going back to your website, you hinted at the fact that the content on there had changed. In what way did it change? And how are you keeping your personality in there?
It has 100% changed. We even went through, I use WordPress. We went through and even changed the theme that we built our website on. because the theme we were using, I loved it, and I use it for Finding Creative Success, the podcast. I use that same thing that I was using for my video production business. But like I said, it wasn't geared toward brides as much. It had a more corporate feeling to it, and which was great whenever we were doing conferences and that kind of stuff because they loved it. But those are few and far between compared to our wedding business. So we went through and we changed the theme so it matches more of the feel of what brides are used to looking at. And we went through and added, like I said, it was just the content on my website was videos with a contact form. And I mean, it looked nice. I made sure it looked great. So, I mean, it was, you get on the homepage and directed to the portfolio, and the contact page had its own thing, but there was no content. So nobody was finding me cold because I had no SEO because there was no content. And the people that did find me, it's like, okay, it's great. There are videos, but the ones that contacted me had a ton of questions because I didn't answer anything on the website. It was just videos. So I went through and I added that fact page on there. And that's an ever-growing list of questions that people ask us. And the homepage has a ton more content on it that we're always adding to. And the About Us page it's pretty lengthy. It's about as long as I want it to get, but it kind of gives the brides and the people looking at our website an insight into our personality. Like even at the bottom there, I say, how do you know if you're a repeat pair? And I list out some different things that are traits of me and my fiance that just kind of show how nerdy we are. And, we love Disney and we love traveling, all this kind of stuff. So it kind of connects with the people that are going to relate with us the most.
So how much help did you get with that website change?
I did that all on my own. I learned early on that I wanted to save money. So I focused on learning how to do websites early in my business, which has helped now. It's helped, with time and money now. So I whenever I do website stuff, I go through and do it all myself.
Were the changes impactful immediately, or did it take a little bit of time before you could actually notice the effects of the changes that you made?
When I first got the big change up, the whole rebuilding the website, that one didn't see as much of a difference because I had to get my MVP up, my minimum viable product. I had to get a site up with a contact form and my videos and a little bit of content just to have something up there. I wasn't going to go, a week without a website. So I didn't see much change then, but, we went in and added all of the content. And the more I'm being myself, the more I'm getting contacted by people. I even had a planner reach out to me, and she reached out to me and she's like, I think I've heard of you before, but I'm not sure. And she heard of me because I reached out to her about a year ago. And I was like, hey, I'm a videographer. If you have any weddings, I'd love to sit down and work with you and, talk about how we do things. And I was trying to essentially get on her preferred vendor list. And it was a cold call, and she's just like, okay, fine, thanks, and brushed me off, essentially, in a nice way. I mean, she's a great wedding planner. I mean, we're shooting a wedding with her now. But she contacted me a few weeks ago, and she's like, I feel like I've heard of you, but I love your work, and I love your stuff. Can we hire you for a wedding? And she contacted me this time.
That's fantastic.
So for me, seeing that come full circle, it's like, I'm doing something right now that's working if I'm having her contact me when I've already reached out to her in the past.
It's like a virtual pat on the back, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Were there any elements of that website change that you struggled with? What were the biggest challenges for you?
Getting over that mindset shift that I can be myself on my website. I always taught, when you have a website, it needs to sound formal, and, you need to have the proper vocabulary in there to make it look and sound good. And after running my podcast, I found it's not that. It's more about being yourself and being honest and transparent with the people who are looking to hire you. So don't try to hide behind any formal language. Just be yourself.
Yeah, that's really great advice. You mentioned earlier your minimum viable product. Our listener may not know what one of those is. Could you describe what one is, and also what yours is and how you develop that?
Well, in that instance, the minimum viable product was a basic website. We had to have a simple portfolio up and a contact form. That way we were online. The minimum viable product can be, if you're starting a photography business, it can be, hey, I'm doing engagement sessions for, $150 for 1 hour session. That's your minimum viable product. You have something to put out the door to offer to people. It's better than sitting on the couch and hoping somebody calls and just randomly gives you money. You have to have something to put out there.
That's a way of enticing people to learn more about what it is you do in that sense.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, for the website, that minimum viable product, I had it out there. I had my portfolio up. I had a little bit of text on there, and I got a few contacts from it. But like you said, it gave people that little open door there so they could get in touch with me, because when I was in between websites, there was nothing up. They had no way of contacting me via my website. So I had to have that MVP up so that people could reach out to me.
Just to give our listener a bit more of an insider's view, what happens next? So say somebody signs up to that minimum viable product. What then happens?
For us, right now we have 2 packages with our wedding video business. And we have one, we have it set up so our prices kind of point to the package that we want to do, that we enjoy doing, and that we feel fits every couple the best. It kind of gives them everything. And they sign up for that. We don't hold back. Some people with their products, they have their stuff set up and they'll charge an extra $300 to fly a drone over your venue to get drone shots. And they charge an extra $200 per hour and all this kind of stuff. And it's all these add-ons. For us, that package, it comes with everything. If they book the package that we want people to book because it gives them everything, we don't charge extra for drone shots. We don't charge extra for hours. We're the people who show up whenever they tell us to be there, and we stay through their exit. So that for us right now, it's our MVP in a couple of senses. It's our most valuable product and our minimum viable product. So we have it out there, and that's what we always tell people to do, because it literally gives them everything. There's nothing on their wedding day. They're not wondering, hey, I wonder if we booked the right package and he's capturing this, or if we should have paid him more money. That's going to give them everything they need.
Yeah, that's really neat. Is that something you learned to do, or is that something that evolved?
That kind of evolved. When I started my business, I had no idea how to do pricing and packaging. One-off pricing is still issues for me. It's still an issue for me whenever I have clients outside of the wedding industry. I had to develop a pricing system for that as well. But it kind of evolved because I was developing those packages and trying to figure it out and play with it. And then I heard, Gary Vaynerchuk. It just kind of affirmed my packaging whenever he said doing the right thing is always the right thing. For me, I feel like charging extra to fly a drone over the venue isn't the right thing, because that's going to make their video better. If I have the time to do it and it's safe to fly and they want a drone shot, then I'll do it for them, because they're paying me to create an awesome video for them. And I just don't like feeling like I'm nickel and diming my clients, because my clients trust me on the most important day of their life. So I want to give back as much as I can.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility. I love this idea of having a fixed price to, you're effectively getting paid for your results rather than paying per hour in that sense.
Exactly. And that's how I prefer to do it, because with our corporate clients, whenever we're doing commercial work and that kind of stuff, we do have, a half day rate and a full day rate. And we don't do like 1 and 2 hour rates, because it blocks up our entire day. But it's a different beast whenever you get into corporate work versus wedding work. And, wedding work, we can have those fixed prices because, we know what we can achieve and what we can accomplish, and we know what we're worth right now. And, that's always, it's growing over as time goes by. And right now we're at that $2,500 mark. And we're comfortable there. We're making a decent living right at that $2,500 mark. So we're enjoying it. Fantastic.
How much of your work is corporate work?
Not too much. We do a few things a year. Like this year, we went up to Chicago and we were the videographers at Podcast Movement. Every January, we go up and shoot a conference in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. So we're there every January. Last year, we went on a cruise for the Podcast Movement guys and shot their Podcast Paradise cruise last November. Do a few one-off things here and there for some clients in Charleston and their surrounding areas. But most of our work, I'd say 90% of our work right now is weddings, and that's where most of our money comes from.
That's fantastic. I love how you just casually say that you're the videographers for Podcast Movement, because that's a big deal in my world. We
love it. We love it. And all the people that are involved with it, Dan and Jared, are just awesome guys. So we love getting to do that with them.
That's amazing. Fantastic. So this is a perfect opportunity to change gears. I've been dying to ask you about your podcast. So tell me more about your podcast and who it's specifically for and what you cover.
Yeah, Finding Creative Success is a podcast for photographers and videographers. And what I do is I go through and find today's top talent, the top videographers and photographers who are successful doing what they do. And I interview them on the show to find out what really drives their business. So, if you're somebody out there who is trying to get into photography, or you're starting out with videography, or trying to take your business to the next level, then you're the kind of person who this podcast can really help. And I know that because it's helped me since I started the podcast. So that's what I do, and that's why I do it.
That's amazing. And I know you interview guests. What's been some of the biggest insights that you've learned from your podcasting experience so far? Being
authentic, being yourself. That's one of the biggest ones for me. And it's the biggest one because I think I hear it the most, aside from having your portfolio and getting that up and being attentive and responding to your clients whenever they talk to you. Don't wait 3 days to respond to an email, that kind of stuff. But the biggest one for me is just being authentic and having that come through, like I've talked about before, having that come through on your website and having your personality on there. It's going to, one, help give those clients who are looking at you that sense of peace because they feel like they know you more. It's going to give them a sense of peace because you have answers. If you have like your fact page up there, then you're answering questions they haven't even asked yet. So you're the professional at that point because you have answers. And it's going to, one, attract the clients that you want, the clients who are like you and who are willing to spend money on you and, who resonate with you before they even talk to you.
Yeah. And I have to say, I love that idea of having a frequently asked questions page that you have, because I can see how people immediately regard you as an expert simply because you've already got the answers without them even having a conversation with you.
Oh yeah. And that's one reason why we added it. And two, we were answering the same questions over and over again. So, and if somebody emails me a question, I'm not going to point them to the fact page because I feel like that's not serving them best, but it gives me a place to go to. If somebody asks me a question that's on that fact page, I can just go copy and paste the answer to them and let them know, personally respond to them. But it's there for people looking, like you said, you come off as the expert when you have answers to questions they haven't even thought about yet.
Yeah. I remember when I interviewed brand specialist Phil Pallen, he talked about, a great online experience reflects your offline experience. So it should reflect your personality. So if I go to your website and then I meet you in person, the two shouldn't be any different. For you, Matt, what do you believe is the key to being authentic?
That was that mindset shift that I had to overcome when I was adding the content, was not being afraid to be myself, because I've always wanted to be viewed as like, the guy with all the answers and who creates the great videos, but I never wanted to be viewed as the nerd and the dork that I am. And I think that was holding me back from being authentic on my website, because if I wasn't showing my true personality, then I was masking it with all this corporate speak and all this kind of stuff. So I went on and I'm 100% myself on the website. I talk about how much I love to eat at Outback, even though it's unhealthy, and how much I love Disney, and me and my fiance are getting married there. And, it even has our engagement video on the back end of the site. It's 100% me. I sat down and essentially treated it like a journal to my clients. When they ask questions, I answer the questions, but in the answer, there'll be like a winky face or something like that. It's just how I was feeling when I was answering those questions.
I love it. I really love the nice irony there that by being more authentic and you're still doing corporate work by not being more corporate, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it is ironic, but it works. It really does work.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's fantastic. So how did you get into podcasting? What made you choose to do a podcast as a photographer stroke videographer? Can you remember the moment you came up with the idea for a podcast?
I can. And it goes back, I was interning for Brent Thacker in college, and we were at this outlet called the Tanger Outlet in North Charleston. We were coming back from lunch, and he's like, hey, this might be a good resource. Have you heard of this podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire? And I was like, no, what's a podcast? And so he told me what a podcast was, and he explained who John Lee Dumas was. And he's like, this guy's making $5,000 a month. This is 3 years ago. He's making $5,000 a month doing this thing called a podcast. And he's just interviewing entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of great lessons in there. I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And, I started listening to it, and I really loved the show. And I graduated college, and I got a job as a graphic design leader. I was over 2 other people. But every day for my job, I was having to drive an hour and 10 minutes one way for my job. And I'm driving a convertible Mustang. So one, it gets bad gas mileage, and I have to use premium gas. So I'm spending a ton of money at a job where I'm not making a lot of money. And at the end of the day, I couldn't afford, because I was making such little money, I couldn't afford an apartment in the area. So I was having to live with my parents an hour and 10 minutes away. And all of my money that I was making was going into food because I was eating on the road because I wouldn't get done till 5:30 at night. I was eating on the road home and paying for all the gas. So a lot of my money was going into that. And then one day I was driving down the road. I was eating my Taco Bell because that's what I could afford at the time. And I was listening to John Lee Dumas, and I was like, this guy gets to sit at home and talk to awesome people all day. And it's helping me, So why can't I do that? And it kind of got my wheels turning, as to what I could do. And I hate to say it, but, that was 2 years ago. Fear of failure and the imposter syndrome kicked in. And I always had a really good excuse as to why I never started the show. And I hated that because it could help people. And it has been helping people since I've launched. And I've seen that for people messaging me on Facebook and sending me emails. But it took me so long to get to that launch point because I wanted it to be perfect and I wanted it to be seamless. And because I didn't know how to do it, I wasn't going to do it. And, this year, I remember I reached out. I was sitting in the living room wanting to do the podcast. I'd shot Podcast Movement. I'd shot the Podcasters Paradise Cruise. I had a bunch of friends that were podcasters. You hang out with these podcasters, even the ones who were making, $250,000 a month, like John and Kate over at Entrepreneur on Fire. They're just genuine people, and they really are how you hear them in the podcast. It's just, they're authentic in the podcast. And I love that. And I was like, I want to do the podcast because it's going to help people. But I also want to do it because these people in the industry genuinely want to help you and they want to, be podcasters with you and have fun. And it's not like other industries where it's like cutthroat and, everybody's trying to get ahead of each other. Everybody in this industry is just trying to help. That's the main goal for this podcast, is to help. And I was sitting there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. So as I was sitting there, I reached out to a photographer that I had worked with a couple years back, who is a pretty big name in the industry. His name's Sam Hurd. I reached out to him and I was like, hey, do you want to be on a podcast I'm launching? Like, I had a basic logo down, but that was it. And he's like, sure, how about Thursday? I was like, all right, Thursday it is. So I had 4 days to come up and develop the questions and, get all the stuff together. I had the microphone already just from other stuff I was working on, but it really lit a fire under me to get started, to get it out there. And, I'm not making any money with the podcast right now. Everything I'm doing is free. Everything on my website that's a giveaway is free. I have no right hook in this instance, like jab, jab, right hook. Everything for me right now is jabbing. I'm just giving everything away. All of the content's free. Anything you see on the website's free. So I do it just to help people, and I'm loving it, and I'm learning a ton.
Sounds like a very conscious decision to do it that way.
Oh, it is. It has to be a conscious decision to do it that way. And, eventually I do want to make money. I'm going to be real. I had a guest on the podcast when I first started, and one of the favorite things she said to me was, it's about the bank account. And I agree with that. And right now, for me, the income that I'm seeing isn't from the podcast. It's coming from what I'm learning and implementing in my own business that's increasing the sales of my video production company. So I am making more money because of the podcast, but I'm not making money with the podcast. So I made that conscious decision, this podcast, for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to make any money, and that's fine because I'm going to be helping people and making connections.
Yeah, I love it. So that time, just going back to that time there where you were thinking about doing a podcast and listening to John Lee Dumas, and that gap between actually launching one, how did you overcome that perfectionism?
It took a while. Like, when I first thought about doing it, I came up with a name for the podcast, and I created a logo, and I created the majority of a website. And then like I said, I hit that perfectionist wall, and I kind of gave it up because I didn't know what to do next. Then about a year went by, and this is after the first Podcast Movement, 2015. So it was about August or September, somewhere in there. I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll revisit this. So I went back and I looked at the logo. I was like, I really like the logo and everything. So I started building it, and I went online and I just typed in the name of the podcast that I was going to do. It was going to be called Energized Creative. And I was like, okay, let's try that. So I went on, and there's a company out there, small video production company. I don't even know if it's still an active page. Like, I don't know if they're still updating the website. It doesn't look like it last time I looked at it, but they're called Energized Creative Solutions. And one of the friends I made on the cruise, he was one of the speakers. His name's Omar. He runs the $100 MBA show. And he just knows a lot about business. Like, I go to him with any business questions because he always seems to have the answer. I went to him. I was like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is the podcast I was going to do. Here's the name. And then here's these guys over here with a name that's so similar. It's just one extra word. And he advised me to switch names. He's like, 99%, you're probably not going to have a problem. But if that 1% comes back and they start making money and they see your podcast, they could sue you for the name. Then you end up having to change the name after you've launched. So, it really kicked me in the pants a little bit, knocked me down. And I kind of got down on it. And I was like, I'm going to try it one more time, because it's something that has kept coming up for me over the past 2 years. Like, hey, I want to start a podcast, and I'd drop it. Hey, I want to start a podcast, and I'd drop it. So this year it came up. It's like, I'm not going to be that 65-year-old guy who's like, hey, I could have been a millionaire if I had started a podcast, but I'll never know because I never did it. So for me, whenever I reached out to Sam Hurd while sitting on the living room couch, I reached out to him, and I was in this fit of like, I'm going to do something with my life that helps people. If I launch and it fails, at least I know that I tried. I'm not going to sit here on this couch every day and wonder what would happen if I launched a podcast. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do it, because done is better than perfect. And I'm going to help people with it. And I'm going to learn as I do it. So the questions in my podcast, they're going to keep changing as I learn more stuff. And as I get consistent feedback, then I'll just go ahead and implement that as the answer for that question. And I'll change the question to something else that can help my listeners. So for me, that done is better than perfect. It really hit me as I was thinking, when I'm 60 years old, what am I going to be saying if I don't launch this thing? So it gives me no excuses down the road.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it was Jared Easley that in a book about podcasting, he says, like only 3% of the people that think about doing a podcast actually create a podcast. So it's really nice to hear that you actually just took that step after a long time of thinking about it and have actually launched a podcast. And also, I really like the name. So I think the fact that you've got the new name is only a good thing. Oh,
yeah. I wanted something that was very easy to tell. It's very descriptive. I mean, the logo is a camera. And if you look at the logo, like if you blow it up and you're sitting there looking at it, it's a camera. The lens is a magnifying glass, and inside of the lens is money. So for me, it's how to find that money using your camera. So that I wanted it to be as clear as possible. With Repeat Productions, I came up with the name for my video production company back in college, and it's not clear. It's a play on my last name, which is funny, but it's not clear for when I tell people. Like you said, whenever I told you it was repeatvideos.com and you asked what the spelling was, everybody does that because it's a different spelling. And, whenever you have the option to be clear or quirky, always be clear. Don't try to go with something that you have to spell out every time. You don't want to have to do that. So finding creative success is pretty plain. It's pretty out there. It tells people what they're going to get.
Absolutely. I think it was Dan and Chip Heath in their book, Make It Stick, where they talk about if you're going to be simple or clever about an idea.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, be simple. If in doubt, be simple.
Yep. And that's what I follow right now. And that's one of the things I learned from John Lee Dumas's podcast. I want to say it was Tony Robbins he was interviewing at the time, one of his earlier interviews, where he asked him, what's one thing you live by? And he said he had this plaque over his desk and all it said was simplify. And when I heard that, with being a graphic designer and a videographer, photographer, you always see the people who are sitting at their project saying, what else can I do to this project to make it better? And whenever I heard that simplify, I don't look at something and say, what can I add to this to make it better? I look at it and say, what can I take away? What have I added to this that's bringing it down? What can I take away from this situation to make it better? So, if your life is too busy, what can you take away from your schedule that's going to make your life better? So I try to live by simplify now. And whenever I see an opportunity to simplify something, I do it.
It's so funny. I've got a post-it right here which says exactly that, and it's kind of coincidental that you're telling me a story that Tony Robbins does that. So
that's great.
I feel quite pleased about that. It's really fascinating because it sounds like that process of simplification for you has been a theme that's been running for some time now. Because when you've been niching down your business and focusing on what it is you do specifically, even your pricing, it all sounds really simple, and you sound really confident with that.
Oh, I love it because I never have to question myself whenever I'm doing something. It's like, is this simple? Is it clear? That's what I'm trying to figure out whenever I'm doing something. And, pricing, I try to keep it simple because my brides, I don't want them to look at a pricing page and, have 4 different packages to choose from. And then if they want to add another hour, they have to pay an extra $200. And if they want drone footage, they have to figure out if they want to do that. And it's an extra $350. We don't do that. That's information overload for our clients. We have 2 packages, and the only difference is for the smaller package, it's 7 hours of coverage. And that would typically, for weddings in my area, that's going to cover everything from the ceremony through their exit. They just don't get the full day coverage like they do with the other package. So it's very simple. There's there's hardly any questions. They don't have to strategically plan us to arrive whenever they're working on stuff. I try to keep everything simple, and it has been something that's, been running in my business for a while now.
It's fantastic. Matt, it's been incredible chatting with you on this hot, sunny afternoon. I could chat with you about this stuff all day, and it's really, really nice to hear somebody who's making a living from doing something not only that they love, but something so creative too. Before we wrap up, I've got a few questions I'd love to ask you. Knowing what you know now, what tips would you offer our listener if they were first starting out trying to create a life doing something that they love?
Knowing what I know now after listening to the podcast, because one of the questions on my podcast is, if you were just starting out and had all of your current knowledge, but no portfolio or leads, what would you do to get a $1,500 contract in a week?
Great question.
And yeah, that's one I ask all of my guests. And the answer that, I see that ties in the most is having that portfolio up. So if you're a creative person starting out, get that portfolio. If you have to go out and do 3 free sessions in a week, find some people who want that, post it on Facebook, get those free sessions in so you can have that portfolio. Get it online, get it in a website, and in the website, be authentic, be yourself, and attract the kind of clients that you want.
What's inspired you most recently?
Inspired me most recently, I would say it'd have to be the books I'm reading. Between, Sell or Be Sold by Grant Cardone, or the one by Gary Vaynerchuk, Jab, 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 Right Hook, has really been inspiring me. I've never been a Twitter user before, but through reading this book, and he's kind of explaining how to use it and showing the correct way to do it, I've started using social platforms that I've never used before. And for me, reading that book is just inspiring me to be more active and more correct in my actions on social media.
Where can folks find you on Twitter right now, Matt?
You can go find me on Twitter at Matthew T. Peet.
So that's Matthew T. Peet, and Peet spelt P-E-E-T. I'll be sure to put all the links in the episode show notes along with the books that you've mentioned. What would you say you're grateful for today, Matt?
Every time somebody sends me a message on Facebook or sends me an email that says, hey, your show's really helping out my life and it's really improving my business, those moments, like somebody sent me a message the other day and I screenshotted it and sent it to my fiance because it makes me so happy to know that I'm helping people with the podcast.
That's awesome. I'm really grateful to have you on the show today, Matt. Finally, where can our listener find out more about you and your podcast, of course?
You can find out more about the podcast at findingcreativesuccess.com. Spelled like it sounds, simple as it could be, findingcreativesuccess.com. And, on there, you'll have all the podcast episodes. There's an About Me page, so you can read from my story from when I was in high school all the way till now. And it just kind of gives you the full scope of who I am.
Fantastic. And I'm sure people would love to reach out to you. There's going to be some listeners that will absolutely want to follow what you're doing and get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Matt?
You can email me directly at findingcreativesuccess@gmail.com. Because the podcast isn't making any money, I haven't invested in getting that personalized email to my domain yet, but findingcreativesuccess@gmail.com is my direct email address. So if you want to reach out to me and if you have any questions about starting your business, then I'd love to answer. And, I'll even give, the first person, if the first person emails me, I'll give them a copy of the Jab, 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 Right Hook book by Gary Vaynerchuk. for reaching out to me, just to help them out a little bit with their social media experience.
There you go. So don't be shy. Reach out to Matt now and you've got a free copy of a book. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I'm only going to do it for that first person, though.
Okay, that's really generous. Thanks, Matt. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time today. I've really, really enjoyed chatting with you.
Of course, Rob. Thank you for having me on the show. It was a blast.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.